Good morning. If you have any questions, please make sure to address it to all panelists so that all of us can see your questions and jump in if need be for your questions. Mar, you don't have to have education. It is not a requirement. You can utilize a degree that you have obtained from a college or a university, but it is not required.
For your question of do you need experience for any license? Yes, every classification that you're want to apply for, you would need to provide at least 4 years in the last 10 years performing or supervising in the trade of the classification applied to.
Chris, I served as a city's contract planner for about 2.5 years and worked closely with the building official doing inspections. Would that count towards my experience? Not necessarily. And that is something that we would ask that you provide detailed information and send an email to our classifications deputy to make a determination on that. Generally speaking, applicants are to have journey level hands-on work experience in the classification that they're applying for within the last 10 years. So working closely with the building official doing inspections, which we do not license, might not count towards your experience. So I would recommend that you send an email to our classifications deputy at classifications with an S at cslb.ca.gov. Thank you, Frank.
Ronald, your question of do I need to attain D40 to have a C61 specialty? So the C61 specialties are subcategory. So if you have experience in that D40 classification, when you submit your application, you specify if that's the one you want to go for, you write it in. So you can either do C61/D40 or just D40 by itself and provide the work experience under that classification.
From Kathleen, can you stack multiple degrees? For example, 12 months for bachelor's and 24 months for master's. You cannot stack degrees. It'll be one or the other. And you can submit them both in a sealed official, as a sealed official transcript with your completed application when you send that in. And what the tech will do upon review of your application and your degree, they will choose the one that gives you more credit. But yeah, you cannot stack them.
Carla, your question was, do I need the experience letter from another licensed contractor or can it be anyone I work for? I believe by letter you mean the certification of work experience form. So if that's the case, if you worked alongside a contractor or if you were employed under a business that was licensed, you can have someone from that employment or the contractor that you work alongside with fill out that form and they'll just provide their information on the bottom portion of the form. Or if you work alongside customers or anything like that, and they can verify your work experience performing or supervising in the trades, they can complete that as well. All work experience would be reviewed, so it's not necessarily a guarantee of this one would be automatic acceptance or not. It'd just be depending on what is provided on the application.
Okay, Charles. I don't quite understand, so I may ask you to clarify, but you say other major education from college, does it work for experience? I can assume that you mean your major that you received on your degree. Does it work for experience? It can. if that is your question. However, that's not determined until you send in your completed application, again, with your sealed official transcripts, and a processing technician will review that information and then decide from there how much, if any, education credit can be granted. Um, I might add that it is best to always have the hands-on practical work experience in the field. As you, again, a college degree is not required. Education is not required. Work experience is.
Thomas, your question, what if I can't contact the certifier past employer to verify your work experience? So if you had someone that worked alongside you in the business, it doesn't necessarily have to be the owner of the business or a HR personnel from the office. It can be a fellow team lead, a supervisor. If you are able to find someone that you worked alongside with in the time of your employment with that business, if they can fill out a form for you, they can do so. It doesn't necessarily have to be one specific person like the owner, as I mentioned. So if you are able to find someone that you work alongside with, you can have that person fill out the information, and then from there we'll review it.
Okay, Nate, the nature of my business is repairing and restoring existing antique wood windows and doors. No alterations to the buildings or openings. Would I need a license to accept jobs over $500? It isn't really construction as I see it. Well, the law sees differently. It is considered a home improvement project, so that falls under CSLB. So anything over $500, which includes labor and materials, requires a license, a contractor's license. Um, Whereas you may not be retrofitting your windows um, and you're just repairing or restoring, um, it still is a home improvement project, and it would, over $500, require a contractor's license. Um, what classification you would need would be another subject. Nate, with as much information as you have provided in the chat, I would suggest that you send an email to classifications@cslb.ca.gov. That was provided by Frank at 10:46 a.m. If you don't know what classification you would need, if you don't completely understand if you need a license or not, shoot an email message over to that email with as much detail as possible, be specific, and a determination can be made for you at that point.
Nick, your question. I've been working as a residential handyman for the past 6 years. I have before and after photos of most of my work. Can that be counted towards experience? So we don't look at before and after photos. If for whatever reason, the technician that reviews your information requires you to provide more additional information to verify your work experience, what may happen is they may ask for project lists and permits depending on the classification that you apply for. So that would be where they will verify the work experience, where what your role was, what the project was, what it entailed, and the final evaluations of it. If it's a pending project, it wouldn't be acceptable as far as work experience. They would have to see the completion of it and as much information of that project as possible.
Khalid, since we are a general contractor working with government agencies out of state, will that count towards our experience? We are looking to get registered in California. Well, as a general contractor, if you have that experience, that's what's going to count towards your experience when you apply in California. It's not necessarily working with government agencies out of state. It's what you have done with your work experience, not who you've worked with, but what you have physically done. Um, that would be looked at and reviewed on your application when you submitted it um, for licensure. So yeah. Um, I wouldn't state that in your application. I mean, you can, but it's nothing that's going to guarantee that your work experience is acceptable. Octavio, I filled out the application dated a couple of months ago, but never sent it. Is it okay to send the application with the work experience application, even if it has a past date and not a current date? How old are we talking, Octavio? If are we talking a year? Are we talking a couple months? A couple months is not a big deal, but you know, your work experience has to be within the last 10 years. So, you know, that part would be pertinent, but I do see you say a couple months ago. So yeah, a couple months is not going to do any harm, although we would prefer that it had a current date listed on it.
Nick, your comment of I'm trying to get a remodeler's license. I believe you're suggesting, or I don't want to assume, but you're trying to apply for the B2, which is the residential remodeling classification. So if you are going for that one, you would just fill out the application, and with your work experience, you would specify the trades, have someone fill out the bottom portion of verifying your experience of the trades performing or supervising in that classification that you're applying for. So with the B2, it would be no framing. It would be 3 unrelated trades to the rough carpentry or framing.
Okay, Michael. Hi, I'd like to apply for a C6 license. I've been doing cabinets for over 25 years. I worked in my uncle's cabinet shop from 1999 to 2014. I did paint work for a few years, but then after our home burned down in 2017, I worked on our home rebuild and did all of our cabinets from 2019 to 2020 at his shop. My uncle passed away in 2022 and his shop closed, so I opened my own cabinet shop in 2023. I would like to offer installation services, but to get a C6, how can I prove my experience? Does working on my own home qualify as work experience? So again, your work experience is required to be 48 months, which is 4 years within the last 10 years. You can utilize something that you did on your own home, but you still are required to have a certifier. So a certifier is someone who has firsthand knowledge of your experience. It does not have to be an employer. It does not have to be another contractor. I believe there's like 7 or 8 different individuals who could possibly certify your certification of work experience form. So although your uncle has passed away, somebody who has knowledge of that experience, firsthand knowledge of that experience, can sign that. Again, you're looking for a minimum of 4 years doing that, and that's what you could submit.
Okay, Kedrick, your question of my qualifier passed away recently and I need to restructure the corporation. My situation is complicated. Is there anyone I can speak to with after this webinar? So what you can do is you can send us an email at licensing at cslb.ca.gov. If you want to specify your situation, and if you want to include the license number of that corporation, so that way we can work with you, so we can see what exactly it is that's going on, be able to point in the right direction.
Okay, Roberto, I started gardening on my own and a few years ago and would like to get my C27 license as proof of experience. Do I just get it from my longest running client? So you can. Again, you need to have the 4 years minimum, journey level. It could be your longest client. It could be whatever you need to accumulate that minimum of 4 years. Keep in mind, though, that gardening, if it was just mow and blow, that's not going to be ample experience for the C27. If you haven't already looked at the classification description, please do so. And although you may not do all of those, your work experience does have to fall within that description. And then provide the proof of the experience within your application. But yeah, you can use your longest running one as long as it's within 10 years, or you can use several if you need to that accumulate to that 4 years.
Khalid, or Khalid, excuse me for mispronouncing your name. Your comment of we have physically done the work. I believe Dana already provided that information in your earlier question about the government, working alongside the government. Donicio, where can we find the study guide? Tal, in the further down the chat, provided you with the link to the list of classifications that we offer for study guides, including the law exam. So if you haven't already clicked on it, go ahead and click on it so that way you'll be able to see it. Nick, so my 6 years of handyman experience potentially could qualify me for a B2. So if you haven't looked already at what the classification description is of what the B2 entails, if you do have that work experience and you do have it within the last 10 years, you can go ahead and complete the application. Now, we don't necessarily guarantee anything because we don't know your situation, how you did it as far as the work experience, but based on what you see on the classification description, if you believe that's what you've done in the last close 6 years, and if it falls in the last 10 years, you can have that certifier or someone who's seen you do the work either by hand or supervised within the 10 years, complete your work experience form. And then once you submit it, we'll be able to review it for a appropriate determination. Nick, the only supervisors have been the homeowners. I should get them to fill out the bottom. So if your if your customers are the ones that seen you do the work throughout those 6 years, or if you worked alongside someone during those 6 years, you can have them complete that form. If you have just one person fill out the form, that's great. Or if you need to make multiple copies for different time periods, you can do so. What we need is to see at least those 4 years within the last 10 years of you either performing the work by hand or supervising the trades in that classification that you're applying for.
Okay, Thomas, I have friends who has a business license with the description of home maintenance. He does window cleaning and gutter cleaning, but he also offers installing gutter guards. The gutters are already pre-installed. He just screws the guards to the gutters. If the job costs more than $500, is that considered home improvement and require a license? So the answer would be yes. Again, it is a home improvement project. However, that friend who has that business license should email our classifications deputy at classifications@cslb.ca.gov and give him as much information as he has, be specific, what he's doing, what he's using, how it's installed, where it's installed, and he'll be able to make that determination for him. But just reading what you've written here, over $500, labor and materials, it would need a license.
Michael, your question of would the general contractor who built our home be able to be that qualifier? Do you mean the qualifier on your license that you want to apply to? I believe that I'm not. I don't have the full scope of what you're asking for. If you want to be more specific, go ahead and include it in the chat, or just send us an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov. So we'll be able to help you out as far as to give you a appropriate answer to that.
Okay, Mar, if you were only an assistant, does that qualify as experience? Well, Mar, we do, CSLB does state that you do have to be journey level, have journey level work experience in the classification that you're applying for. As an assistant, that might not qualify. And it's dependent upon what your role was. What did you do? But not a lot of information is listed here. As Frank has mentioned, you can send a detailed email to our licensing at cslb.ca.gov email address with that information, and one of us can look at it and give a better answer, but we would need a lot more details than what you provided here.
Thomas, your question about how about exterior lighting that is not hardwired, just plugs into existing electrical circuits, but it's mounted to the house and it's going to be considered permanent. So if the projects all that including labor and materials, if it's over $500, you would be required to get a license. Now, the type of the classification or license that would be dependent on the full scope of work that you're doing. So as Dana mentioned, you would want to email our classifications deputy at the email that we provided, classifications@cslb.ca.gov, and try to be more specific as the type of work that is being done. So that way we'd be able to give you an appropriate determination of which classification that all falls under.
Michael Ruiz, you said for the C6, I think you were the one who stated, could the GC be your qualifier? Who built our home be able to be that qualifier? I'm not certain. I know you asked about cabinet making, I believe. You had the uncle. Whomever has that firsthand experience or that firsthand knowledge of you working on those cabinets is who can be your certifier, if that's what you're asking. But yes, please send an email with more detailed information. We've provided it through the chat. I just provided them again at the bottom, one for classifications and one for licensing. Mar, I'm not sure what you mean by what was the website. Those are the email addresses. Otherwise, you can visit our website at www.cslb.ca.gov, which does have a lot of information for applicants. Do we have any more questions? James, regarding the $500 handyman exemption limit, is that a limit for a certain period of time or for work at that address? That is for the project that you're working on. There isn't, I don't know, James, that's a little bit of a loaded question. If somebody had hired you to do something on December 1st, you finished it and then you go back and do another project, I mean, is that what you're asking? Or did you know ahead of time that this is everything that you had to do? I mean, at that point, you couldn't cut it off and say, okay, this is $499, so I'm going to go on to the next thing and do another project at the same address. James, I would ask you to send an email to the classification deputy with that information. Again, be as detailed as you can, be specific, so that he can let you know what is up with that. Roberto, what comes first, the contractor's license or the DBA? Well, Roberto, when you submit your application, you have to have a business name. So depending upon what entity that you'd be applying for, that's when you would put your business name. And if you wanted to have a DBA, you would put your DBA on your application as well. And that would be prior to licensing. So the business name has to be there. If you're going to add the DBA, do that before you get the license. Otherwise, there would be an additional fee to add a DBA down the line. if you didn't have one at this time. Carla, the Spanish seminar is held, I believe, in 2 weeks. Is that correct, Frank?
It would be the third Friday of every month. So I believe it'll be in 2
Oh,
weeks.
because it's on the 20th.
Yes.
And then I think a couple days before, you can sign up on our website that Frank typed in at 11:06.
Nick, your comment on we're working at the same address for multiple days, can each day be considered $500 if they can technically be broken down into different projects each day? So earlier in our workshop, if the value of the project is 500, is more than 500, it won't be acceptable if you're trying to break it down into multiple sub projects. It's a one full project. If it's worth over $500, including labor and materials, then that's where they require to have a license. Now, if you do complete a project that's under 500, you complete it, and then let's say years later, you get hired on the same property for a different project, then that's where that $500 limit still would apply. But if you're breaking it down into multiple, that would not be acceptable.
James, I guess it is better to ask if there is a better place to explore the nuance or legalese. I'm realizing that it's a host of edge cases. My recommendation, James, and to everyone would be that on our website, we do have a free download for the California Contractors License Law and Reference Book, which does have our laws, contractor laws, written so eloquently. If you need help, we can always help if you want to look for a specific section. However, it would benefit everyone to take a gander at it and look and see what is written there, what's expected of you as a contractor in the state of California, and what are the I can do and I cannot do things, as well as it gives you guidelines on how your contract should look. So it's a plethora of information.
Roberto, your question, how much to add a DBA after? I'm still working on all that, and I don't want to shoot myself in the foot and have to pay too much later on. So for us, at this moment, if you're trying to apply for a business, depending on your business structure, if you do require a DBA, then that's where number one, we don't require you to provide that fictitious form of the payment already. So if you are applying, let's just say after you decide your business structure, it's acceptable. You can go ahead and register with the county that you're going to be doing your business in and be able to do all that. But you don't necessarily have to register it right now and pay for it. You can provide the business that you are going for as far as your DBA. Now, if you're going for like a corporation or LLC, that's where you do need to register with the Secretary of State's office to have that filing number that they'll provide you that will be essentially your ID number that we can verify with their records to make sure that before we issue that license, we issue it to the correct business. Nick,
go ahead.
Nick, your question, be accepting sort of finance and their payment options, or do payments have to be paid all at once? So as far as your application payment, there is no payment options. It's just pay the application fee. You do have the option to pay the back end fee, which is the initial license fee, but you don't have to pay it all at once. You can pay for it once you pass the exams. The limit technician requires you to provide all the other last minute, which is the insurance and workers' compensation and all that, if that applies to you.
Thomas, I heard the cost of the license being $200 to $300 depending on sole owner or entity and bond cost. But does submitting an application cost anything, and does taking the exam another cost as well? So what would be the total of application, exam, and license fee? So your application fee is $450, and that is the license fee. the application fee, sorry. Once your application is accepted, you're passed on to testing. So your testing right now is included in your application fee. However, if you were to not pass your exams, then right now you would have a $100 retesting fee, non-refundable. Again, your application fee is also non-refundable each time that you went to retest if you weren't able to pass your exams. So your cost can um, fluctuate. You know, it's not set in stone. Once you are ready to be issued, you've passed your exams, you're ready to be issued, then you would owe an initial licensing fee, and that is based on the entity that you're applying for. So the sole owner is a $200 ILF, whereas a partnership, an LLC, or a corporation is a $350 ILF. So again, it fluctuates depending upon what you are applying for. Your bond cost or your insurance cost for workers' compensation or general liability is not included, as that is something that you as the contractor are going to go out and provide to us. You don't pay us for those, you pay your insurance agent or broker for that. So yes, there are different costs. The costs are listed on the application themselves, and it is based upon your entity.
Nick, you said for the application fees, the application fee, I think Dana already mentioned to it for the 450. There are additional fees as well, but you're not required to pay it all at once at that moment. You can wait until the technician requires the last steps after you pass the exam. So when you submit your application, you'll have additional information there as far as what other forms and fees are due. But like I mentioned, the technician, once you pass your exams, you'll be provided with a letter that provides you with, before we issue the license, these are the things that are needed, and it'll break down what exactly is needed. Michael, your question, my cabinet shop has been open for a year now. Would that be sufficient for 1 years of experience? So we're not necessarily looking at the business that you have open. It's what you've actually done by hand. So if you were employed with another business, or if you've done other self-employment work under your C6, if that's what you're applying for, and that falls under what you're trying to apply, and it's within the last 10 years, then that's where you can have someone that's seen you do the work either by hand or supervised in those trades that you're trying to apply to, complete that form, and then submit it with your application. But it's not necessarily a business that you establish. It's more so what you've done by hand or supervised, whether it's employed through another business, working alongside another contractor, or if it's under your own business.
Okay, Nick, what fees are refundable? The only thing at this time that is refundable would be the ILF, which is the initial licensing fee, which, as Frank mentioned, is not requested until your license is ready to be issued. So that is the only thing that is refundable on the application. Everything else is an earned fee once the application is submitted to CSLB. Okay, Octavio, I have the application filled out April of this year, but didn't send it yet. Trying to get my C6 license. The work experience I have was from January 2014 through August 2018, and the certifier filled it out and dated in April. After that, I've been on and off a couple different jobs are related to construction, work on different trades. My question is, can I still send it in with the dated date, or do I need to fill out a new application with a current date? Frank, what's your opinion on that?
So with the work experience that you have, it goes by 10 years of when we receive your application. So for example, if we received your application, let's just say today, what the technician will review is in the last 10 years. So it'll be December 6th of 2014. So you may, if that's your only work experience that you have on the application at hand, what may happen is the technician may say your work experience is going to fall out of the 10-year limit. So you may need to provide an additional work experience form that can meet that minimum requirement of the 4 years. So you may run across that. But if you do have additional work experience, you can just submit include a copy of another work experience form, have either that person you worked alongside with or someone else to meet those at least 4 years. But if you have more than 4 years, go ahead and include it so that way you'll be able to be reviewed and be accepted.
Nick, does generational experience count towards qualification? Like if it's in my blood? No, your hands-on experience is what counts, Nick. Yeah, it's going to be your hands-on. And again, your certifier, whoever has firsthand knowledge of that experience. Barry, 6 years experience in warehouse racking design and installation, design of racking, layout, structural permitting, fire-related permitting, currently working under employer's B license. Looking for getting GC license on my own for permitting consulting work regarding rack layouts, structural issues with customers. For permitting racking projects, a B license is required. What would be the insurance and bonding requirements be as a GC permitting and consulting on racking projects? Well, again, your insurance and bonding comes from the outside. So you're going to have to get that directly from an insurance agent or broker. All licensees are required to have a contractor's bond in the amount of $25,000. And then depending on whether or not you hold a classification that requires workers' comp, you would also have workers' comp if you had employees or if you had a certain classification, which requires that workers' comp. Also, if you had your qualifier was an RME, which is an employee. So as far as insurance and bonding, again, that's outside that you would send in to CSLB. CSLB requires the bond. CSLB requires the workers' comp or the exemption if you are eligible for that. But as far as pricing, which I don't think you asked, that's something that you would have to inquire on the outside for those people. Now the GC, we don't license consultants. So your information or your experience needs to be based on your hands-on experience doing the B general building classification with your employer. Permitting goes through your city or your county. So CSLB also doesn't have a stake in that, as that is outside our jurisdiction. That is up to your city or county for your permitting. We provide the license. We put you through the vigorous testing regiment to get your license, and then we license you. But as far as the others, those are outside sources. Any other information, Barry, because it was kind of loaded with what you said here. You might want to send a detailed email to our licensing email that we provided earlier that we can provide again. But I see that it's over there on the webinar with all that information, and either we can pass it on to our classifications deputy, or you can also send an email to the classifications deputy with the information that you're doing and what you might need additional, or if that classification is even the right one for what you're doing. Because I'm not design, we don't license designers. Installation, yes. So yeah, I would probably ask for a little more detailed email with your information in that so that we could maybe give a better answer for that. Nick, does CSLB help with finding customers anyway? No, we don't. We are a state agency. Again, we license you. We review your information. We send you on to testing if we find that your experience is acceptable. and then we license you. It is up to the contractor to find their customers, advertise, or whatever you will do at that point to find clientele for your trade.
Thomas, your question is, what are different options, cost of study materials for the exam? So study courses, classes, self-study materials such as books, CDs, DVDs, and cost of those materials. So that is actually up to you as far as if you need those, you can go ahead and look for it on your own. We don't affiliate or partner with any schools, programs, or any places that offer those said materials or anything like that. We do have study guides that we offer on our website, and that including in those study guides includes resources of where the questions may come from. So they'll have hyperlinks included with it, including the law book, which you're able to get a free PDF copy of it also on our website, and that will be able to help you out. There's also other publications that we offer on our website that it's included in the resources. For example, get licensed to build, that would be for the law exam. So that also is something you can also get from our website as a free PDF.
Okay, Nick, do we still need a business license on top of this license, or are they considered the same thing? They are not considered the same thing. I'm not certain about the business license. Again, that's something you would have to contact your city or county about. CSLB is a state agency, and the licensing is for the state of California, whereas your city or county is going to be, one particular area. But you would have to verify that with your city or county to see if they want you to have that. Ours is completely separate, and we do not have jurisdiction over them. So that's something, again, that you would have to check with them. And if they require it, you would have to have that also. Again, just a friendly reminder to everybody, licensing at cslb.ca.gov. If you need a more detailed answer to your question, but then again, please provide us with as much detail as you possibly can. Classifications at cslb.ca.gov for a determination of a classification if you are unsure of what you should apply for. So do we have any more questions? And if you don't want to ask your question in front of everybody, which is perfectly fine, you can also send the email to licensing, and one of us will answer your question.
So if there isn't any more questions, that's all the time we have for today for our workshop. Thank you all for your questions. If you have any other questions about your application or situation, we encourage you to drop an email to our licensing division, which was that email address that was on the screen. That's licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Here's that email address again, licensing@cslb.ca.gov. If you, at some point, you need to reschedule your exams, you can get that process started by emailing exams@cslb.ca.gov. We also put together a list of available resources for women considering a career in construction. If you haven't already, be sure to download this presentation to get them. You can download the presentation on a banner on the top of our homepage, www.cslb.ca.gov. If you're watching the archive video of this workshop on our YouTube page, you'll find a link to the presentation down below.
Okay, we welcome your comments and topics for future webcasts. Just drop us an email at social@cslb.ca.gov. Special thanks to our licensing division and public affairs office for their help on this workshop. The Get Licensed to Build workshop is a copyrighted production of the California Contractors State License Board. Thank you for watching.